to really study the Bhagavad Gita from the perspective of, I want to set the direction for my life next year. You know, if I'm at a point that I'm confused, I don't know what to do, where do I go next? I'm going to approach the Bhagavad Gita like that. And one of the first things I realized from looking at it is that Krishna is not saying in the Bhagavad Gita throughout that set goals, set goals, set goals. He's saying something quite different throughout multiple places. I noticed. I actually was writing just in the second chapter, he's saying it a few times, and third chapter, fourth chapter, he's saying it throughout. And that is, be detached from the results of what happens. Now I'm thinking, okay, be detached from the results and set goals. That's like kind of like contradictory, isn't it? It sounds contradictory. What happens is when we set goals, they're almost like tasks or big tasks, right? Things we want to achieve, things, direction we want to go. But like you said, I think when you were sharing, you were saying things are not in our control quite often, right? So, like I'm sure 2020, everybody had set up some goals, but January 2021, COVID started and out goes the goals, right? So we may set these goals and tasks, but goals and tasks may or may not be achieved because of factors within your control or maybe outside of your control. Goals and tasks may or may not be achieved. So it's very tricky when you tie your whole life around tasks and goals. Because what do you do if you set up a big goal, you work really hard, but that was not achieved? Or something happened that made that goal completely unachievable. Say your goal was to build a taxi company, and then along came Uber and destroyed the taxi cab market completely, right? Completely out of your hands. So what do? So there are things that are outside of control that destroy it. What it tells me is that we need something more permanent. We need something more lasting, something more kind of like high level than just like goals and tasks to align our life with, because we may or may not meet our goals. So what could be a better thing to do as we approach 2026 if it's not goals? Then what do we do? What Krishna is focusing a lot in the Bhagavad Gita throughout, he's saying, don't be attached, like he's talking about, don't be attached to the result. And we'll dwell into it a bit more. But it's all about purpose-driven living. You know, your purpose doesn't get smashed if goals are not met. If your purpose in life is to become God conscious or develop love of the Supreme, right? You may have different goals for that. Those goals may or may not work, but that purpose hasn't changed. We see the purpose of life from the filters of our own vision. And we try to call it our purpose. What I'm trying to drive at is the way it was easy enough to kind of show that goals are tricky to set and be by, right? Yeah. Now I'm kind of moving on to purpose and our ideas of purpose. And you're starting to see that there is some relativity in our purpose statements, like help people, get out of a bad space. I mean, who defines what's a bad space? For many people in this world, just being able to live in the United States is a good space to be in. They go through so much dangerous immigration situations just to find a place to stay in the US, right? You heard of that? Like, so. And then those who are here are saying, we want to get out of a bad space. People will be like, what are you talking about? Isn't it? But is what you're saying wrong? No. Is what they're saying wrong? No. So it's a relative statement. I'm trying to drive our attention to the difference between relative and absolute. That does not change. And dharma is a much more specific way of seeing purpose. Dharma means that which does not change. So if you have sugar, white powder, and you put it on your tongue, and it's not sweet, what is it? Is it sugar? No. If you have white powder, you put it on your tongue, it's salty. What is it? Salt. right? So same way, if you have water, if you have fire, there's heat and there's light. It's the nature of the fire. Similarly, the nature of the sugar is to be sweet. So we need to find out, when we say we have to find, that's called the dharma of the sugar, right? So we want to find out not just a relative purpose, we want to find out what is my dharma. Am I making sense? That's what we really need to find out. And that is what the Bhagavad Gita is about. So instead of, what I'd say is, instead of approaching 2026 with goals that you may or may not remember, that you may or may not meet, better to approach it with a realistic, lasting sense of purpose, which is actually called Dharma. Better to approach it, and better to attend. And how do you achieve that purpose? Not through tasks, but through attitude. Attitude alignment. It's amazing what you can get through with proper attitude. And I wanted to focus on that today, like 3 attitudes which make us successful no matter what the situation life faces you, throws you with, right? And this is why in the Bhagavad Gita, sometimes when you first read it, you're thinking, it's so deep, it's so dense, right? But as you read it more and more, you start to see it's a very emotional journey. I mean, Arjuna is in a very tough situation. He's in the middle of the battlefield. Have you ever had an argument with a family member that leaves you really pained? Over the holidays, maybe? I don't want to bring up bad memories, but it happens, right? It's a very pain. Now, Arjuna, every single one of his family members is lined up in front of him, weapons in hand, arms in hand, and ready to fight a battle. Not that, you're remote controlling through some bomb or something like that. No, face to face, man to man combat. He's going to have to kill every single one of them. Can you imagine what he's going through? Although they have tortured him, although they have dishonored his wife, although they have stolen his wealth, they've done so many things. So there's a trauma of all that he's gone through. And now he has to deal with these people who refuse to see there's something wrong with what they're doing. You've heard of cases, right, where people go through an abusive situation and the person who's a family member may not acknowledge that this is anything wrong with what they did, right? He's going through that. And here's the thing, he's fully capable of fighting this battle. He's fully capable of winning. There is nobody like him in the entire planet in terms of warriors. He's called the Atirathi. Atirathi means he can fight 60,000 warriors, not like foot soldiers, but warriors who are like on chariots at the same time. If he's simultaneously attacked by 60,000 people, he can fight it and win. That's an Atirathi. That's how brave he is. He's an expert in yoga techniques. He's very, very qualified, and he's a saintly king. He's a devotee of the Supreme. He's like lover of the Lord. So all of these things are there, but still he's in this situation. Imagine. It's a very difficult situation. And the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna is not telling him, what are your goals for next year? What are your goals for this battle? He's constantly guiding him how to maneuver his attitude. He's constantly giving him advice. And I noticed there are some attitudes that Krishna repeats in the second chapter, then in the third chapter, then in the fourth chapter, then in the fifth chapter. He keeps on repeating it over and over again up until the 18th chapter. And at the end of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna doesn't tell him you should do this. He's saying, you do yathechasi tatha kuru. How you desire. Ichha. Yatha ichhasi. Yathechasi. You do as you desire. He's giving him the knowledge to purify his desires, but then he's saying, do as you desire. And that's always the case in our spiritual journey too. Like when you guys were introducing, I said the door to self-realization opens from the inside. As human beings, when we live a purpose-aligned life, or a dharma, I'm going to more accurately call it dharma rather than purpose, because purpose is a very relative statement. What's your purpose? What's my purpose? How can every single person on the planet have a different purpose? And then we have resources for everyone's purposes and live peacefully. That's what's going on in the world today. We are living in a world. We're living in a world where greed defines goals. We want to live in a world where God and God's pleasure defines goals. And you may say you're not greedy. I'm not greedy. But greed just may not mean all the things that you imagine. It just means your senses want something and you want that for your senses. That's it. Could be a pretty face, could be like, a good car, could be comforts, could be whatever. Your senses demand something and you work for them, and that's greed. You're acting on the impulses of your senses rather than acting on the purpose of your life, dharma. In our life, see, we live our life a certain way, right? Because of that way, we're interacting with the modes of nature and they're churning. There are forces, they say there are forces in this world. There are forces in this world. There are actual forces in this world. The forces of goodness, passion, and ignorance. 3 kinds of forces. They're called gunas. In Sanskrit, they're called gunas. We're constantly surrounded by it. Like, for example, you can't start a party in the middle of the night, like early in the morning at 4 a.m. You got to start it in the night, right? Why? Because there are certain activities you can do easily when there is ignorance, the energy of ignorance. Nighttime is time for ignorance. You want to get drunk, do all those things. It's hard to do it at 4 a.m. in the morning. You got to be a real professional to do it at 4 a.m. in the morning, right? It's hard. 4 a.m. is the time for meditation, prayer, things like that, right? So throughout the day, there's different energies that are predominant. Some are up, some are low. There's that. The carrot and the apple, right? So our diet, a natural diet, is a plant-based diet, a natural human diet. Like your mouth will water when it sees some delicious fruit. Natural reaction. It won't water when it sees a dead animal on the floor. Do you look at a dead deer on the street and go, yummy? Do you do that? No, your mouth doesn't salivate. But if you see a tree full of cherries or something like that, your mouth will naturally salivate. It's a reaction. It's a natural food. Some food in the mode of goodness. Same way there's food in the mode of ignorance and passion, like dead animals or highly spicy food or highly like intoxicating food. There's different energies. So I'm not going to go into every single one of them, but different activities we choose to indulge in, different ways in which we live our life means different energies we are in touch with. And there are 3 primary kinds of energies: goodness, passion, and ignorance. Okay? And based on the energy we indulge in, our life goes a different direction. Urdhvam gachanti sattvasta. When you're in contact with more of goodness, urdhvam, you go upwards. Madhye tishtanti rajasa. That when you're in more of passion, you stay in the middle planetary systems where we are right now. And more of ignorance, jaganya gunavrittasya adho gachanti tamasa. If you're in tamasa, more of ignorance, you go downwards to more hellish and hellish planets. So there's different energies. Right? Energies are moving constantly. Some are aligned, some are counterproductive. You're constantly think of yourself in a little, I don't know what you call it, like a twister. Energy is moving all the time. And based on what you're associating with, there's a force, a vector that's created like you. And this is called your desire. You don't just get desires because you want them. No. You get them because of the energies you associate with. Your desires can completely change when you change the activities of your life. And that is Krishna consciousness. We purify our objects of senses through which we purify our senses. And then our real desires. Right now, we're not living a life of our desires. We're living a life of impulse. And we are trying to have desires on how to organize this impulse in a nice way. Put some money in it and make me organized. That's why I said we have goals driven by greed, not by God. You understand where I'm coming from? So I had this visual, like I said. See, the energy is flowing. You have desire, the desire energy, right? So it goes off like a vector. Like if you had a little slingshot, you went like that and you threw it and it just flies off, right? Anyone done that? So it goes off. So this desire, it goes and hits your senses. The ears, the eyes, the nose. And then the desire comes in, you're like, agitated. That's called agitation. Ooh, I want this. Like before you were 13 or 12, I don't know what the age now is, but when I was little, till you're 12, 13 years old, you didn't care about the boys. They were like your enemies, right? After 13, who knows what happens? Your brain just sees the world differently. Anyone remember, I'm not saying 13, but anyone remember that time in your life when the bulb switched? right? Like just life was different before that, right? And then after that, it's completely different. The desire energy hits the senses, and then the senses become agitated in different ways. And what do we think? What's the propaganda? Happiness means you get what you want. Or in other words, you get what your senses want, right? And so we struggle. But here's where the yoga knowledge, the Bhagavad Gita, is telling you something completely different. It says the senses are agitated. Apuryamana achalam pratishtam samudra pravashanti yadvad. It says just like in an ocean, the rivers are dumping tons and tons and tons of water, isn't it? Does the ocean change its limit? But does the ocean change its limit? No, it stays where it is. The rivers dump tons of water. If you fall in a river, you'll drown, but the ocean doesn't drown. So we have to be like that ocean, filled in ourselves, so that the desires, when they come endlessly, desires will never stop. They come endlessly. What needs to stop is our acting on them. So a yogi does not act on the desire. So we tolerate. Krishna doesn't say like many times people who practice bhakti will ask me, I have this desire, I have that desire, I don't know what's going on. And I always say, like, Krishna doesn't say that you have to eliminate desire. He doesn't say that the desires will stop bothering you. He simply says one has to tolerate the coming and going of the desires. We have to tolerate. And if you've anyone here who's been an athlete or a musician or a dancer or something, if you want to practice, you got to practice. We just have to tolerate the desires. We don't have to change them, end them. We just have to tolerate. Why do we tolerate? How do we tolerate? It can be very agitating, right? How do we tolerate? Why do we? The only reason you can tolerate the things that are out of your control, the things that we don't have, that we want, that we hanker after, is if you have a higher sense of purpose, a very clear North Star. That's the direction I'm going. And that's called Dharma, because it's your eternal nature. So they say your purpose aligned. What they're really saying is to be aligned to your Dharma, your true nature. When we take on activities in this world that are aligned to our true nature, that's when things start to line up. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Nasti buddhi ayuktasya, one who's not connected, nacha yuktasya bhavana, that one who's not connected with Krishna cannot have steady intelligence. And one who's not connected with Krishna, doesn't have a steady intelligence, cannot have a steady mind. He says, you're in doubt, you don't know what to do, always think about what is best for Krishna's pleasure. And when you act for the pleasure of Krishna, every other purpose is automatically served. Because sometimes in life, actually many times in life, there'll be a situation where you don't know what's the right thing. It's not obvious. But in that time, you have to really think, don't think that I really want this, so I need to do this. Think, in this situation, how do I bring myself closer to Krishna? How do I bring myself closer to my life's original purpose, to service the Supreme? When you think about that, all of your other little purposes will automatically be met. But if you go after the little purposes, ignoring the big purpose, everything will anyways fall apart. Am I making sense? Yeah. You probably have experienced that in your life. Because oftentimes we take decisions out of fear. So much of what we do in life is because of fear. I'm afraid of being alone, so I will stay with someone. How many people walk into relationships like that? You don't have to answer that, but we do, right? I'm afraid of not being able to have this much money, so I will work for a job that I don't want to. Right? A lot of our decisions are based on fear. I don't like what's happening, but I might be rejected by people, so I'll stay quiet. How many people speak up when they don't like what they see? Very few. It takes guts. So a lot of our decision in life is based on fear. And Krishna is saying in the Bhagavad Gita, one of the things he's saying, Vittaraga Bhaya Krodha. Man Manava Mam Ashra. He said Vittaraga, freed from raga, attachment, like I said, Bhaya, fear, and Krodha, anger. Be freed from attachment, fear, and anger. And in that state, you approach me. And how do you do that? If you're attached to a result, a certain thing going a certain way, there is no way you can make a right decision. One thing he says is, do not be, he says, be detached. Rather, he says, detached to what? Detached to happiness and distress, fear and anger, success and failure, both. Okay, I understand be detached from failure, but detached from success? So he's saying throughout various parts in the Bhagavad Gita, he's saying, be detached, be detached, be detached. And how do you do that? By being attached to the Supreme. We're detached from these little things because our attachment through every choice in life. One of my mentors, he taught me this. He says, Bhakti or Krishna consciousness is not a choice you make at one time. Today, I have agreed to join this community. I will come every Friday and I'll attend these classes. So I have joined this group. So that's my decision now. Now I'm just going to suck it up and live with it. Right? That's not bhakti. Bhakti means at every moment in your life, in every decision, I need a partner, I need a job, I need to do this, I need to exercise, in every moment you're thinking, in every decision you're thinking, how do I do this that it makes me more aligned with the purpose of my life, which is serving the Supreme? But it just needs some guidance to do that. It's not impossible. It needs guidance to do that. It doesn't mean you stop doing it, because you see, sometimes people say spiritual life means you do nothing. And Krishna's saying detached, right? So detached means what? I do nothing, right? That's the idea we get. Be detached means I can do nothing. I'm just going to lie down in the mountains and Himalayas and just breathe in and out. That's the idea we get, right? Deep down, I gotta live my life. But Krishna is not saying that do nothing. Rather, Arjuna is saying, I don't want to do anything. I'm going to retire and go to the Himalayas. And Krishna is like prodding him again and again. If you've read first 3 chapters, you've seen he's prodding him. He's like, Mam anusmarna yuddham cha. Remember me and fight. Multiple times he's saying, fight, get up and fight. Be resolute in your purpose. Get up and fight. Again and again he's telling him, fight, 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 fight. How does that line up? Be detached and fight. Like, how do you go to a fight? And actually, one incident happened with me that actually helped me really connect the dots for myself. I'd gone horse riding, and my instructor, she could stand on the horse on one leg and like bend over, do yoga poses. And I was like, ah! Like jumping, turning around. She was even riding it like backwards. I was like, how do you do this? You must be really fearless. I thought it's a quality that she has developed. And she said, no, I've fallen from the horse so many times and broken my bones so many times. 21 years old. Only 21 years old. She's such a good rider. And I really liked her. But, I actually think about this point quite often. If you are attached to a certain result, you will always have fear of things not going your way. And as long as you're fearful, you can't go too far. To some extent, to really learn something, you have to kind of like not worry about the result. You know what I'm saying? And Krishna is saying that's the killer attitude. Don't worry about the result. Do the right thing. What do? Decide what we want and manipulate everything to get it. And then fall flat on our face. Then get up, find a few friends, try to get drunk and forget about it, and then do it all over again. If you are a soul, right? Just like if this plant above you there, do you think what is good for the leaf is different from what is good for the roots? I have to water the roots to really care for the leaf, right? Yatha taror mula nischanena. When you pour water on the roots, that leaf will automatically be nourished. It is as simple as that. Because you think you are a person separate from Krishna, and you have your own plans and ideas, and I also think, not that I'm not picking on you, you think that I need to act for my self-interest. That's the problem. That's why we need knowledge. That's why we need to read Bhagavad Gita, because that helps us see that, the hand cannot be happy without the stomach being happy. The leaf cannot be happy without the root being happy. And we cannot be happy without being connected with Krishna. Nasti buddhya yuktasya nacha yuktasya bhavana. You cannot be fixed in mind, you cannot be fixed in intelligence. Abhavatya kuto shante. One who doesn't have the fixed mind, you can never be peaceful. Shanti means peace, right? Because if your mind's like all over the place, one moment you'll be happy, next moment you'll be sad, third moment you'll be excited, fourth moment, because your mind's just changing. And ashantasya kuto sukham. One who's not peaceful, peacefulness is the platform for happiness. Ashantasya kuto sukham. There is no happiness for someone who's ashanta, who's not peaceful. So, what are the root of your existence? I'm not talking about universal truths. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about service to the Supreme. That is what we are meant for. We're created for that purpose. We have human life. Tell me one thing different you can do in your life that a dog can't do. Right? So what is it that you can do that a dog can't do? He doesn't have the equipment to do it. And if you think in that way, you see ahara, nitra, bhayamaitunascha, samanya vetat pashupat narana, ahara, eating, sleeping, mating, defending. It is the same in all species of life. Like you may think you have this complicated sexual ritual, and that's really something sacred, but the animals have it too. And the actual pleasure is in the contact, which is the same in any species of life. The pigeon, the bird, the dogs, the pigs, they're getting the same pleasure from that activity that you're getting. The rest of it is in your mind. And they don't even get so much stress after it. So what is it so special? Dharmo hitesho adhiko vishesha. Human life means dharma. You can achieve the highest goal of life, dharma, connecting with the Supreme. That in any other species of life you can't have, because that body is not so developed, your consciousness is not so, your consciousness is not so exposed or expressed. The dog's also conscious, the cat's also conscious, the cow's also conscious that it's being slaughtered and that its children are being taken away. It's conscious. But the amount of consciousness is fully manifest in human life. That's why you have an existential crisis. A chicken looking at the worm is not having an existential crisis that do I need to be vegetarian? Should I eat the worm or not? They're living on impulse. Impulse. Hungry, worm, eat. Impulse. When human beings live like that, that's animal life. So a purpose-aligned life, when I say do the right thing, I mean, so what? It's very obvious. If you is this activity going to help me connect more with Krishna or not? That answer to that question is always clear. Other questions may not be clear. Is it going to get me more money? Is it going to get me do this? That may not be clear. But what's most pleasing to Krishna can be very clear. The only gap is, I'm not convinced right now that what's most pleasing to Krishna is most pleasing to me. It's an honest answer, right? I'm not convinced right now, which is why we read, which is why we chant. Because by doing those activities, we get more knowledge. So another thing Krishna says in terms of attitude, number one thing he says is be detached. So write that down. Make goals this year, make plans, or whatever you want to do, purposes, whatever. Be detached with the results of it. Be attached. The way to achieve detachment is by being attached to Krishna. Develop attachment for Krishna, and that attitude will help you get through anything. Anything. Does that make sense? And the next thing he says, do not be bewildered. This is a big one. He says to Arjuna, in the second chapter itself, he's saying it 3-4 times to Arjuna, do not be bewildered. He says the body, it's constantly changing. First you're a baby, then you become big baby, then you become an even more big baby. A grown person, I'm making a joke, nobody got it, it's okay. But anyways, you grow up and you're still like baby, but you keep growing, the body is constantly changing, the soul's the same. But we get bewildered by that change. Where's my baby body? Something's happening. We get bewildered by the change. What happens when we turn teenager, 13, 14, like the world changes, right? You get bewildered. What happens when you get old? Every other day is a different problem. You're sick, you're sick, you're sick. So we become bewildered by these things, right? You were able to walk, now you're falling down. What's happening? You see what I'm going? So do not be bewildered by changing, sometimes people are bewildered if they have a good friend and they cheat on them. They're very bewildered by how could you do this? Don't be bewildered. in this world. But then when you're in the details, right? When you live your life, remember the modes I said, the cycle whole thing. When you live your life as if the body and the connections with the body are be all and all, you spend a life of perpetual bewilderment. When you rise above the bodily consciousness, just think about like this term bodily consciousness. Bodily consciousness means you think pleasure will come from the body or the pleasure will come from the mind. So when you rise, unless say you come here on Friday night, right? And then you go Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, all your decisions are based on what's going to give pleasure to your body, what your senses are pushing you to do. Then how are you going to be, when you're going to read, don't be bewildered, you can't apply it, right? It's just because you are bewildered. You're bewildered by what? The urge of your senses. Those urges, they're so strong that they bewilder you. So powerful. So on your own, you, like you said, punching you were talking about, right? So like you were saying, there's a one way, you can't have a punching match with your mind. You cannot have a punching match with your senses. It's impossible. But it is possible to increase your attachment to Krishna. It is possible because we are naturally like love, right? We want love in our life. So fan that spark of love for Supreme. Fan it. Expose it by, like you said, you like coming here and taking on the positivity, meeting people. That's fanning that spark. I'm going to meet other people who want to be in this journey. So add more and more sense objects that remind you of the Supreme. And through that process, you will see your natural attraction will come out. It does not matter what your religion is. It does not matter what your label is. But your love for the Supreme will naturally come out when you make choices based on His pleasure. Attitude was detached. Do not be bewildered. And then what does He say? Steady. Be steady in mind. Because situations will come, circumstances will come that will try to throw you off track. All your life it's going to keep happening. But you have to be undeviated in your process. And that's what really stands the test of time. And that's how we develop. Like, I'll just give a small story. There was a person, and he got a seed. He planted a seed in his pot in the balcony, and he watered it a little bit, took very good care of it, and slowly a small plant started to come out. And he attended to it every day, pick out all the dead leaves, give the right amount of water, make sure sunlight is there. Slowly this plant started to become very beautiful. The neighbor could not stand it. So the neighbor decided to get a plant, but he wanted it faster and bigger. So he pumped it with fertilizer, got it a little extra light from here, they call these additional chemicals, and it became really big really quickly, even better than the neighbor's original plant. And the neighbor kept doing his thing. One day, guess what happened? A big storm came. And the storm came, and this guy who had this big plant that was like stuffed with chemicals and stuff, it got completely uprooted and destroyed. But the other guy, the first guy, his little plant was completely fine. Why? The neighbor asked him why. And he said that I was just watering the roots, and the roots became strong. So the plant could stand the storms. You had a big and beautiful plant, but the roots weren't there. So the slightest storm, it finished. So we don't want to be like that big, beautiful plant with weak roots. We want to have deep roots. Remember the example of the ocean that I gave? Be filled like an ocean. Because when we're filled, how can we be filled? How can we be so deep? By connecting with the Supreme Deep. So when we are connected with Krishna, we feel like the ocean. These storms in life don't deviate us that much. We're getting a taste. We're getting a taste. That taste is coming from our practice.